They use U.S. dollars, vote in U.S. elections, fly the U.S. flag. But quietly, a few states may be leaning north. What happens when U.S. states start choosing Canada economically over their own country? This is 360 Economy. And in the next 6 minutes, we'll unpack a shift no one is talking about yet. We'll start with the numbers. Then, we'll show you which states are already aligning more with Ottawa than Washington, and why it could accelerate fast. Stick around. The list may surprise you. The US and Canada share the world's longest undefended border, stretching over 5,500 miles. But beyond geography, their economies are deeply intertwined. Trade integration, Canada is the top export market for 36 US states. Michigan, for example, exports over $23 billion annually to Canada, mostly in automotive parts and vehicles. These supply chains span the border daily. Energy dependencies, Montana and North Dakota, rely on Canadian crude oil and refined petroleum. In October 2024 alone, Montana imported $4.2 billion worth of crude oil from Canada. Hydro-Quebec supplies electricity to states like Maine and Vermont. These are not just buyers and sellers. They're partners in essential infrastructure. Agricultural links, North Dakota and Minnesota export wheat, beef, and dairy to Canadian markets. Livestock often crosses the border for slaughter or processing. In total, U.S. agricultural exports to Canada totaled $32 billion, including $1.7 billion in grain alcohol, $1.5 billion in food preparations, and $1.3 billion in baked goods. The Ambassador Bridge between Detroit and Windsor sees over 10,000 commercial vehicles daily, carrying $323 million worth of goods across the border each day. Other crossings like the Blaine, Washington-Surrey, BC Port facilitate billions in trade. For many states, Canada isn't just a neighbor, it's a lifeline. Economically, many border states function like regional partners in a shared ecosystem. While economic integration deepens, political and cultural alignment is also shifting. Once an independent republic, Vermont's values lean heavily toward Canadian-style governance, universal health care, strong environmental protection, and cooperative economics. Movements like the Second Vermont Republic still advocate for secession or realignment. With large Acadian-descended populations and French-speaking communities, Maine shares a cultural bond with Quebec and New Brunswick. It also depends heavily on Hydro-Quebec for energy. Washington and Oregon share climate, economy, and values with British Columbia. Movements like Cascadia propose a transnational identity centered on environmental sustainability, shared governance, and social equity. Isolated and culturally distinct, Alaska depends on Canada for overland transportation and logistics. Indigenous communities share heritage with Canadian First Nations, and there's growing interest in greater self-determination. Minnesota shares not just a border with Manitoba, but a mindset. The Scandinavian influence on both sides nurtures a culture of social welfare, moderation, and environmental respect. These states often feel more philosophically aligned with their Canadian neighbors than with policies coming out of Washington, D.C. Now imagine a crisis scenario. Political polarization. Deepening division leads to gridlock and instability. Economic instability. Inflation spikes, national debt grows, and infrastructure crumbles. Social unrest. Healthcare systems break down. Education becomes inaccessible. Social services dry up. In such conditions, states that already share economic and cultural links with Canada might start asking serious questions. What do we gain by staying federally tied to a government that isn't delivering? Are there more secure, cooperative models available just across the border? With its automotive industry deeply integrated with Ontario's, Michigan might seek closer economic policies with Canada to safeguard its economy. Given its energy imports from Alberta and shared environmental concerns, Montana could deepen economic cooperation. Washington and Oregon might align with British Columbia on climate regulation, healthcare frameworks, or even emergency planning. We're not talking about full-blown secession, at least not yet. But legally and politically, nothing prevents states from forming bilateral treaties, economic zones, or shared infrastructure plans with foreign nations. Why would U.S. states look north? Economic stability. Canada's banks are among the most stable in the world. The country weathered the 2008 crisis far better than the United States of America. Social safety nets. Canadian provinces offer universal health care, subsidized education, and child benefits that reduce inequality. Environmental standards. Many U.S. states want to curb emissions, protect forests, and invest in clean energy, areas where Canada already leads. Autonomy. Canada's federal structure gives provinces substantial control over education, healthcare, and infrastructure. This kind of local authority could appeal to U.S. states feeling constrained by federal dysfunction. Moreover, Canada has historically welcomed regional identities. Quebec's French culture is not only protected, but celebrated. This model of cooperative federalism is attractive to regions seeking to maintain local culture while enjoying national-level benefits. This isn't just speculative fiction. The seeds of this transformation already exist. Cross-border regions, the Great Lakes Economic Region, includes Ontario and 8 U.S. states, coordinating policies on trade, transport, and environment. Academic integration, universities in Washington and British Columbia share faculty and research grants. Cross-border education programs are increasing. Emergency planning. During wildfires or natural disasters, states like Montana have received help faster from Canadian provinces than from FEMA. So, what would the future look like? Imagine a binational region where Washington State and British Columbia jointly fund rail infrastructure, regulate tech industries, and share healthcare data. Where cross-border workers access pensions from either government. Where environmental rules apply regardless of which side of the 49th parallel you're on. It sounds radical, but only because our mental maps are outdated. In a world where economies are global and crises don't respect borders, loyalty to a flag might mean less than loyalty to prosperity, security, and dignity. As climate change accelerates, markets fluctuate, and politics grow more volatile, we may see borders blur, not with tanks, but with treaties, trade, and shared trust. Thanks for watching 360 Economy. If this reshaped your thinking, hit like, subscribe, and share. Because maps may change, but insight is forever.